The Nassar Logic, Indicting the Real Boston Strangler. Case file 1964-71. I'm taking criminal investigations. Let's look at this here case here. Diving deeper. Let's start with Albert DeSalvo. So look at Albert DeSalvo. In his interview, he's searching for approval. He's a compulsive confessor who wanted to be a legend. Now look at George Nassar. That is a cold 150 IQ stare. That is a man who doesn't need your approval. He needs your compliance. Today, we are indicting George Nassar for the 13 lives that history tried to pin on a puppet. The logic? Again, the patsy and the professor. In 1965, DeSalvo and Nassar were cellmates at Bridgewater State Hospital. DeSalvo was a petty criminal known as the Measuring Man. Nassar was a genius-level sociopath. The logic is surgical. Nassar knew DeSalvo wanted fame and money for his family. Nassar needed a shield for his own crimes. Nassar later admitted, and I quote, again, Nassar later admitted, and I quote his words, "We were setting it all up, saying, Al, you're going to confess, you're going to do your book." He fed him the crime scene details that had not been made public. That is why DeSalvo's initial confessions were full of errors. He was reciting a script. He hadn't memorized them yet. The evidence. Gruen testimony. Again, the Gruen testimony. Let's talk about Gertrude Gruen. She is the only woman to survive a strangulation attempt by the killer. In a lineup, the police brought both men through the lobby, and when she saw DeSalvo, she said that is not the man. Again, I repeat, in a lineup, the police brought both men through the lobby, and when she saw DeSalvo, she said that is not the man. But when she saw George Nassar, she became physically upset, saying there was something frighteningly familiar about him. The logic says the survivor knows. The history book says the survivor was confused. I'm going with the survivor. DeSalvo was stocky and clumsy. Nassar was lean, athletic, and fit the physical description of the slim man seen at the crime scenes. The hit, the Walpole silencer. In 1973, Albert DeSalvo reached out. He was ready to talk. He told his doctor he was going to set the record straight. 1 week later, he was found in the Walpole infirmary with a knife in his heart. The prison calls it a drug hit. Again, I call that a lie. You don't kill a man in a locked infirmary over a drug debt. You kill him to keep the Strangler legend alive. If DeSalvo recanted, George Nassar becomes the _1 suspect. The hit was surgical. The hit was necessary. The hit was the final piece of evidence that DeSalvo knew too much. The verdict? George Nassar is guilty. Again, George Nassar is guilty. Again, the poem DeSalvo wrote was called The Strangler's Ghost. He wasn't writing about himself. He was writing about the man in the cell next to him. You seen the logic. We seen the papers. DeSalvo was the face, but Nassar was the hand. I'm the lead investigator, and I'm taking criminal investigations. This file has been reclassified.